Thank you very much, Senator Shelby, and thank you for opening this hearing. It's part of this very bipartisan trust that we have each other, and I appreciate it. Because of the terrible storms in the capital region, it took me 2.5 hours to come from Baltimore today. We've had accidents, mudslides, etc. Trains are down, and I appreciate that we want to show that we can live on Mars. I'm kind of dedicated to showing that we can live on Earth right this particular minute. So I want to thank you, Administrator Bolden. I've already read your testimony, and I want to acknowledge the written testimony of NASA's Inspector General Paul Martin. We had hoped today to be able to have his actual oral testimony, but because of the pending votes, we wanted to move as expeditiously as possible. Inspector General Martin has identified 9 top management performances and challenges facing NASA, all of which this committee strongly believes that it needs to address. In the interest of time, I'm going to ask unanimous consent that my full opening statement be included in the record, and that we move to the process. I'm going to move right to my points and my questions. First of all, we want to say good morning to you, Administrator Bolden. I'm sorry I couldn't be here earlier, that we couldn't have had coffee together, and so on. And we appreciate your continual service to our country. And we also, as I said, want to thank the Inspector General. Also, I know Senator Shelby and I really want to thank the men and women who work at NASA and the men and women who make up so we want to thank the men and women who are the civil servants at NASA, and we want to thank also the contractors who do so much of the important work. They've been under so many stresses. I mean, doing space and aeronautics in and of itself is challenging technology, challenging environments. You know, it's not just like a movie called Gravity, which was mesmerizing, where it had a happy ending. And we also, because they faced everything from sequester to slam down, shut down. It's been a rough road. Yes, ma'am. So we really want to thank them for their continual dedication. There are many issues discussed, one of which is the aging workforce at NASA, impending retirements, the recruitment and retention of others, but let's get right to the appropriations. First of all, I was deeply troubled to receive the President's budget. I was deeply troubled to see that NASA I was deeply troubled in the area of NASA because there was a reduction of $186 million from fiscal 14, which we already knew was tight. I can't thank Senator Shelby enough for the way he helped move that omnibus. It didn't happen because of Barbara Mikulski. Behind me, there was a whole lot of we, including my vice chairman, and we worked together. So when we saw this $186 million, it was deeply troubling. Now, I'm committed to a balanced space program, human space flight, a reliable transportation system to both the space station and areas beyond, the space science, and, of course, aeronautics. So we saw the $186 million cut, and then to rub raw the sores of discontent, we also saw that Goddard Space Agency was cut by $200 million. $200 million in very important science programs. Senator Shelby's also raised the cuts in SLS and Orion, which are the kind of hallmark for going out there. So I'm going to go right to my question about how to maintain a balanced space program when the 2 major programs, I know Senator Shelby has looked at those things related to a heavy lift capacity. How are we really funding a lot of things at the expense of space science, and why did you take $200 million out of Goddard?
Senator, as you said, and I appreciate your enthusiasm for a balanced portfolio. We have sought to put in place a balanced portfolio for the agency. There are a number of projects that are in formulation that will be, in which Goddard will play a critical role. The funding for those projects have not yet been designated and distributed. So we look at the long-range viability of each of our centers. And I firmly believe that Goddard will continue to be an integral part of all the programs that we have going forward. I mentioned the formulation of a mission to seek out to satisfy the objectives of WFIRST as laid out by the decadal survey. None of that is reflected yet in the NASA budget, in the out years, or in the Goddard budget. So those will be areas that will be plussed up. We look at all of the centers. I sit down with the center directors and Robert Lightfoot, and we look at what they see for the out years, because stability is what the center directors seek. And stability in funding is something that you have said is a goal of yours, and I applaud you for that, because nothing will be as critical as stability in funding in the out years for our planning and for centers to feel that they know where the future is, and the instability in funding has been the thing that has us where we are right now.
I understand the stability and funding issue. It's not only I, but it's Senator Shelby, and I must say our mutual leadership. So that's why we work with Senator Murray and Senator Sessions to pass a budget that canceled sequester. It was a tough swallow. I would have wanted to do more in some areas, less in others, my colleague, but that's to be debated. So you want to talk about future missions and decadal, and gee, Goddard's going to have a future, but it has a future now in its bread and butter issues. The two bread and butter issues in telescopes are keeping Hubble on track to continue to be the greatest telescope since the Galileo, and the James Webb. So with James Webb, we know that there's been a decrease of 13 million. I don't dispute that, but the margins are very thin and they're at the high-risk area. I've been out there, you've been there together, we've seen some of this, it's very exciting. Hubble, in the meantime, continues to fly and continue to dazzle and continue to write the science books and continue to make Nobel Prize winners. So at the same time, Hubble's been cut $23 million. And now I know some might say that's an accounting adjustment and we're going to fix it in 2016. I don't know what 2016 is going to be. I know what 2015 is going to be. So this is where we need to do. So I don't want to talk about future missions. I'm going to talk about now. I'm going to talk about earth science, heliophysics, planetary science. I don't want science to fund, to be a bank account for other projects that might or might not happen in the future.
Senator, I promised when I became the NASA administrator that we were not going to use science as a bank for any of the programs in the agency, and I think we've done that. We have not moved, and I refuse to move any funds out of science into another program area. What we're looking for is a balanced portfolio inside the Science Mission Directorate. And as I said, the missions in formulation, that when Chris Scalise talks about the future, which is exactly what he's saying, when he looks at the out years, he doesn't see funds for WFIRST, or he doesn't see funds for PACE.
I don't want to keep beating a dead satellite here. But Earth Science is $56 million below fiscal 14, and fiscal 14 was already tough.
Senator, we're finding that we have efficiencies in the way that we fly Earth Science missions. For the first time ever, we have 2 Earth Science missions that are going to the International Space Station this year. They are significantly less cost to the taxpayer. So, and we're trying to find more and more ways to get efficiencies in our programs. So I think in the long run, when I sit down with Chris Scalise at Goddard and Charles Alachi out at JPL and Steve Jerzik down at Langley, the people who spend most of their time thinking about earth science and planetary science, will find that there is a balanced distribution of the funds in the out years once we get a lot of the formulation.
You and I really strongly disagree on this, Administrator Bolden. We really do strongly disagree on this. But I want to go to something we do agree on. and that goes to the extension of the life of the space station. That was a bold decision on your part, but both Senator Shelby and I, along with our colleagues, want to make sure we get research value for that. And what has been so, I think, strong has been the bipartisan support of both the appropriators, and when we look at our authorizers, and back in the day it was Senator Nelson and Senator Kay Bailey Hutchinson, the whole idea of what could be done on the space station was exciting. So let me get to my question about that. In order for the space station extension to be viable, we need to be able to get there.
Yes, ma'am.
We're all deeply troubled about what's going on in Ukraine and the behavior of Russia and Mr. Putin's words and so on, and we leave that to our president and our Secretary of State. But what we're worried about is the reliability of, as I understand it, there are two ways that the space station will be, we have to be able to get there. So one, we've got to keep commercial crew on track. And then the other is, as we impose sanctions with the Russians, will this jeopardize their cooperation in Soyuz? So let's put Soyuz here. Let's go to commercial. One, how do you see the commercial crew staying on track, commercial cargo, particularly with the orbital ATK merger? And then second, where could you bring us up to date on the relations with the Russians? And no matter what happens, do you think that would be stronger, or is that in jeopardy?
Senator,
could you answer both of those?
As I mentioned to Senator Shelby earlier, I could not state more strongly that the relationship between Roscosmos and NASA is solid. I communicate with my counterpart on a regular basis. Bill Gerstenmaier, who runs human exploration, was just there for a launch, for Soyuz launch about a month ago, and he continues to work. I think you know that Sergei Krikalev, who was a former crew member of mine, is in the leadership there in Russia.
So you're all okay in doing kumbaya now, but you know, it's a delicate situation internationally. We are going to be escalating our sanctions, and I'm not talking about your current relations. I'm talking about, are the future relations in general in jeopardy? And do you think that our aggressive pursuit of sanctions, and I'm supporting the president in his sanctions, we have to take a strong stand, and we're proud of our NATO alliance. So you see where I'm heading?
Yes,
here?
ma'am. And Senator, as much as I would love to delve into diplomacy and things, because I do think I have a worthwhile opinion, but I'm going to resist the temptation to do that. And I'm going to say that what I am striving to do is continue the relationship that I have with Mr. Ostapenko, who heads Roscosmos, to make sure that he does everything that he can across in Russia to calm down the diplomats and the politicians there, as we're trying to do here in the U.S., to help people understand the importance of this partnership. We're trying to accelerate as rapidly as we can the availability of commercial crew so that we can launch our astronauts from U.S.
Let's
soil.
move on to that. But I think really, Senator Shelby and I would like to be able to stay in touch, and also to keep an eye on, I think it's a very delicate situation. So let's go to commercial vehicles. So what do you think, how are we doing on commercial cargo? And then let's go to commercial crew, both from a budgetary standpoint, and when do you think, what are the targets for commercial crew?
Senator, we're in relatively good shape. We're in great shape with our commercial cargo right now, because Orbital Sciences, that does use a Russian engine, has enough, we are told, has enough engines in their stockpile to get through this contract. We are in the process now of getting ready to negotiate a new contract for commercial cargo after 2016. Orbital, like most other companies, are working with the engine manufacturers to see if there's not a U.S. option for engines. So those are things that they've been doing long before this recent crisis took place, because they would like to get newer engines. The NK-33, which is now the AJ-26, is an old Russian rocket engine. And Senator Shelby knows that we've been trying to get away from that and get to new technology as quickly as we can. And that work is underway. SpaceX has an American-generated, American-manufactured engine, so that part of the commercial cargo is stable and should not be affected at all.
Well, now let's go to commercial crew.
Yes, sir.
Do you envision, what is your target timetables? Do you have the resources to meet those timetables? Could you elaborate?
Senator, I have to thank you for fighting the good fight with commercial crew and trying to keep our funding as high as possible. Because of your efforts and that of Senator Shelby, the 2014 mark, while not what we would have wanted, was enough that if matched with the President's request for $848 million in 2015, will keep us on target for a 2017 availability of American capability to launch our crews to space safely and reliably through competition, which we feel is absolutely necessary.
Well, as I understand it, a commercial crew is funded at $848 million. It's $156 million above fiscal 14. And your goal was to send astronauts to the space station on U.S. rockets by 2017. Is that right?
That's correct. That's
so
the present
you envision
goal.
American astronauts to be on a vehicle that can go to the space station by 2017.
That's correct. In an American vehicle.
Excuse me.
Yes, ma'am.
That's exactly right. And do you feel that you have the resources to be able to accomplish that? We're obsessed with the safety, and I know you are, boy, yes, more than, we're committed to the safety of our astronauts.
Yes, ma'am.
Exploration's great. We love extending the life of the space station, but we're for the safety of those men and women who are so daring to do this. So whatever we do,
yes, ma'am,
we know that there's always risk, so we know that.
Senator, I cannot overemphasize this. As long as you continue to fight as you have been doing, you and Senator Shelby, on the importance of commercial crew, if we can get the President's request funded at $848 million, based on having the 696 that we have this year in 2014, we should be on target for an American capability in 2017. Senator Shelby and I were talking earlier, is it possible to accelerate that? With more funds, it is possible to accelerate that, but we are sticking with a 2017 crew launch availability.
Including all the human ratings and...
That's all the human ratings, and that
right.
some
so
of
now,
the carriers...
Well, when will, and then it says that but if we fund it at fiscal 15, this will maintain the competition of two providers. Do you intend to shrink that, or do you intend, right now there are more than two providers.
I will, if you will allow me, I will stay away from saying how many they're going to be, because I don't know how many we're going to select. But what I want to assure you is, no matter how many providers we select, the vehicle will be safe. It will meet our requirements in every regard, and it will be available in 2017. So that is what I can promise this committee, and that's what's important to us right now.
Senator Shelby, did you
have
want to
any
ask?
other questions? I just
Did you have any?
have
No,
one
did.
more observation.
Oh, well, before we do, I didn't know, because I know you've been very interested in this commercial group.
We got into it a little earlier, and I appreciate you continuing that vein of questioning.
Well, and we could talk about our telescopes, but I understand that they're on track. But for the James Webb, this is a very difficult time. I want to go to another issue that's of keen interest, again, on both sides of the aisle, which is cybersecurity at NASA. As I understand it, NASA's got some pretty big challenges, and this has been identified by you. It's also been identified by the Inspector General. The Inspector General talks about inadequate tools for real-time monitoring, a high amount of unprotected network access point, uncoordinated adoption of cloud computing, failure to use best practices in managing IT vulnerability. Do you want to comment on the IG's rather stern assessment of the cybersecurity situation?
Senator, I will say, as I did with Congressman Wolf in an earlier hearing, we recognize long before anyone else, I recognized the first day I became the NASA administrator that we had a big hill to climb in terms of IT security, how we run our IT program, cybersecurity, because we are among the largest areas threatened in the federal government. We have made a number of actions Now we have worked with NAPA to do a study of our foreign national management access or foreign national access management. That study also included cybersecurity, IT security. It identified 27 recommendations that they gave to us. I accepted every single one of those 27 actions, and we have prioritized them in coordination with NAPA in what we think are critical areas of importance. So we go down on a risk basis. We are already working on the top 6. They are funded with internal NASA funds that we already have available. When we get ready to submit the 2016 budget request, we will have a pretty good idea of how much additional funds we need to put into IT security and cybersecurity. We're going to have to put additional people on it. We're advertising right now for a manager for a foreign national access management program.
Who's in charge of this?
I am. I am ultimately in charge, but my chief information officer. My chief information officer is Larry Sweet from. I brought him up from the Johnson Space Center. He was the chief information officer there. He was competitively selected. But
so are they? Is Mr. Sweet? Is that real? In other words, have you put into place a management structure to oversee the cyber structure?
We have.
Because it's very uneven and goosey-goosey. You know. We're worried about protecting .mil. Okay. I think .gov is very whifty. And then, of course, there's the challenges to .com that we see in the marketplace every day. But I can't control .com, but we can do with something about .gov. So we really need kind of the edge of the chair on this.
Yeah. Senator, there's when you talk about leadership, there are 3 people, 3 belly buttons that I push. Joe Mahaley heads our operational security branch. Robert Lightfoot, who is the associate administrator, has overall oversight for this. Senator Shelby knows him very well from his time at the Marshall Space Flight Center. And then Larry Sweet. So between the 3 of them, those are the 3 that I go to who can answer any questions that may come up about our approach and our plan in the out years for shoring up our cybersecurity, our IT infrastructure. One of the basic problems we had was governance. There was no centralized governance for IT. The chief information officer for the agency didn't control anybody except people at NASA headquarters. That's unsatisfactory.
You've been the administrator for 5 years.
And we now have, just as public relations or public communications, legislative affairs, information, IT, that all comes to headquarters for coordination. We don't order people what to do. We don't control the funds at the center level, but we coordinate it such that funds are spent in.
Well, I appreciate the progress you've made. You've had the job for 5 years.
Yes, ma'am.
This is not a new problem.
No, ma'am, not by any stretch of the
Cyber has
imagination.
been an ongoing problem, and we hope that there continues to be a sense of urgency. We agree, I think, all of us, on the goals of NASA. We are troubled over this continually shrinking resources. Remember, we are given a cap on discretionary spending.
Yes, ma'am.
And there are also firewalls. We note that the NASA's highest funding level was in 2010 when it was $18.7 billion. That's roughly about $1 billion less now. So we're not on an upswing here. And there is not new money on the horizon. So I think we have to be candid about that. We are looking at this in a very strong way. We are committed on a bipartisan basis to a balanced space program. And we have big challenges ahead, and we need to cooperate with you. And we do appreciate your longstanding service, both in other capacities serving the nation and now. But though we agree on the goals, I'm not so sure we agree on some of these priorities in here. So we've taken your testimony, and we found it very informative. Again, I really apologize for being late. I'd hoped to be here earlier. And thank you, Senator Shelby. And so we need to have ongoing conversations. Yes, we hope that within the next week, between now and next Thursday, that we will have our allocations ready, and that we will begin to do our markups. And it would be our goal to have CJS through the full committee before the 4th of July break. So that's our goal, that's our timetable. And because of the strong bipartisan support, which and strong, tell it like it is from Senator Shelby, I think we'll get it. So thank you very much, and we'll be in touch with you and your staff.
Senator,
This committee stands in recess, subject to the call of the chair.
Thank you.